Right now, B2B SaaS companies are spending billions, like billions with a capital B, capturing product usage data like clicks, logins, feature interactions, and almost all of that data is going to the product team. Meanwhile, the teams responsible for keeping and growing revenue, like CS, sales, account management, growth, marketing, they're all making these $1 million decisions based off of NPS scores, surveys, or as one customer put it, osmosis. So there's this massive revenue signal hiding right inside your product data, and most companies aren't seeing it. So today we're going to talk about why it is that you can't see it. And if you stay to the end, we're going to talk about what the best companies are doing about it and how you can sort of steal and adapt their playbooks for your business.
Yeah. And I think for me, the interesting bit from the conversations is the way what the customer is doing is changing, for example, so that, customers are disengaging faster.
Mhm.
And so it means to keep them engaged, you're having to increase the way you look and how you handle and how you manage your customers. So CAC is up 14%. Growth slowing. So essentially, you're not being able to buy your way out of churn. And I think the number that really got to me was the new data that's coming through is saying that existing customers are generating 40% of your new NARR. Like your base is the growth engine. Like, does that just blow your mind?
Yes and no. I mean, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And then I think the other number that we saw there is that if you're doing more than 50 million bucks a year, it's half of your new revenue is coming from your customer
Yeah.
base, your existing customers. And so what we're talking about, and the reason that we wanted to have this conversation today, right, is that if it's coming from your existing customers and what you're relying on is that CS at scale, customer relationship type stuff, gut feel. I mean, someone literally did say to us, like, we do this based off of osmosis. Like, the more time we have in contact with our customers, the better we feel like we can predict what's coming. And customer success teams, account managers are just not given real product usage data. What is that company doing in our tool today that tells us whether or not they're engaged, how many users are actually working with the tool or not? So there's this big disconnect between all this product analytics data that I think the number that I saw was it's an $11 billion market, right? Which is huge. So companies are spending big on it. We've had conversations, right? $100,000 a year is like a standard investment into a product analytics tool for a company doing like 10 million bucks in revenue, right? It's a huge outlay. And the same CEOs that we've talked to, you ask them the question like, oh, are you getting value from that? And they go, I don't know. So like, I'm sure the product team is, but if you're not giving that data to the revenue teams, Kate, I just feel like it's such an opportunity missed that you need to be looking at what your customers are actually doing, right?
Well, this is the thing. You see, for me, no one's owning that translation layer between the product behavior and the revenue outcomes. So, you've got all this data coming through, events, funnels, user flows for PMs, and your CRMs and your CS platforms, they're kind of focusing on contacts, renewals, tickets, which is kind of built for commercial teams, but you kind of sit and you go, I think there has to be a middle ground, don't you? I think we need to be thinking differently in the way we look at this. And the thing that also came through was that, if a number of SaaS companies score themselves on how well they're converting product engagement into revenue, and 55% said we're scoring less than 5 out of 10. So that's a fail. Like they're self-assessing that they're failing, and yet this is their revenue engine. So
Yeah.
for me, I just get really shocked. So Pete, if you were going to look at this, well, we've been looking at this, and what are the winning companies doing? What are they doing, Pete?
Yeah. So I think it's important to say, like, we're definitely not saying that product analytics tools don't have value. I think that's actually a really important place to start. So like if you've done that, if you made that investment already, you are halfway home. It's just that it's adding that revenue signal layer. And this is something that we just hammer on constantly is, are you interpreting that data into something that your revenue teams can use? I'll go back to that number. If more than half of your new revenue comes from your existing customer base and you don't know what they're actually doing in your product, I'm sounding doom and gloom here, but it's actually a huge opportunity, right? You've got the data, you can use it. And so what the best companies are doing is actually stacking on top of an amplitude, a mixed panel, or a post hog is this translation layer that says, what does that mean to someone that's responsible for $1 million a year account? Can they see how active customers are at account level, user level, who the power users are, all that sort of stuff. And they're moving beyond that sort of sentiment-based health scorecard and looking at what customers actually do, like real behavior patterns, not just kind of how did that call feel on the last time,
Yeah,
if that
and
makes
things
sense.
like automated early warnings when usage patterns change. And sometimes there's nothing to worry about, and sometimes you've kind of got to get in there. But before the renewal's due, before the customer raised the flag, you've actually got this really good signal rather than a lagging signal. Like you have a
Yeah.
meeting and no one sounds happy. To me, that's a very late signal.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I think sort of like the converse to that we hear a lot is, a big customer churns, but on the last call, everything sounded great. Or they told me that they were going to use that new feature. And this is that disconnect again, where if I'm a CSM and I can't tell whether or not they've actually gone and done that, I'm just kind of hoping that it's not that people are lying to you. They have
No.
good intentions, but things happen. People get busy and maybe I don't log back in. And so being able to connect the conversation to the actual behavior is such a huge win for teams. We see them start to connect those dots and know what is my next best action with this account. And sometimes it's to kind of put your hands up and go, look, they're actually doing great. I'm going to stay out of their way. Other times it's like engagement's starting to dip. That power user hasn't been here for the last 2 months. It's time to jump in, reconnect. And that's where the human element to me comes back in, is based off of what your customers are really doing. Right.
And I think it also just helps you to prioritize and understand where you're leaning in with a human, where, and where it could be automated or AI. And, usually the cutoff is, lower paying customers get automated, higher paying customers get touch. But it's about being informed across all your spectrum so that you can just actually make better decisions.
Yeah, I think that's the leverage point, right? Is actually just knowing, like, who do we have on the team? How are they using their time and where are they basically putting their time and focus? And if, yeah, like the quickest wins, what we've seen, frankly, is that it's really easy to overcomplicate this,
Yeah.
but the teams that do it really well start by looking at a small set of features, a small set of metrics like engagement scores, activation, percentage of active users out of a whole. Like if you sold 100 seats and only 10 people are using it, I'd say you're at a lot higher risk of churn than if you got 80 out of 100 using it. So knowing those numbers and then knowing what to do next is what like the really high performing teams are doing. The ones that are pushing their NRR up above 100%, up above 110, where you're growing whether or not you're making sales. So that's where we all want to be, I think.
Yeah. And so I think there's a few questions we can leave people with. What do you think they'd be, Pete?
I think the first one is like, do we have product data? Like, are we tracking that? And if so, is it getting to the people that need it beyond the product team, beyond the engineering team, which again, is valuable to those teams. But do you have your revenue teams looking at ingesting and not having to interpret it constantly, but giving it to them in a way that they can see a signal, act on it, and start getting ahead of not rescuing accounts, but keeping people happy? That's a big one. So do we have the data? What are we doing with it? And then if you are sharing it with your revenue teams, are they able to act on it? And are you
Yeah, and is it
discussing like,
changing your numbers? Because if
yep,
it's changing your numbers, you're really, you're really cooking with gas, aren't you?
yeah. And from what we've seen, the change, like the before and after, if you give your teams those metrics that we mentioned before, the engagement score, activation, active users, percentage, like onboarding stuff, If you give that to them, what happens after that? And what does your net revenue retention look like after that? And ultimately, bottom line, how much money are you making and how much of it is coming from your existing customer base?
And maybe we'll give Pete, we've got a nice little article on your 7 engagement signals. Maybe we'll add that into our notes.
Yeah, we'll link that below. That details what the signals are and how to go about getting them. So we'll have a link for that in the description below. All right. So just to wrap us up, Kate, really quick conversation on this, but the odds are if you've found product market fit, you're tracking product analytics data, and it is not being put into the hands of the revenue teams, there's a huge opportunity there. So I don't want to come across as pessimistic at all. I think this is such a big opportunity for teams to really dial up that revenue from existing customers.
And I think that's where the path is. That just seems to be where the opportunity is at the moment.